Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and with Super Ninja Steel right around the corner, seems as good a time as any to fully discuss Season 1. This probably won't be structured like my other seasonal thematic reviews, mainly because it's hard to gauge what Ninja Steel thinks it's going for thematically. So, as the video title suggests, we'll break things up into sections in an effort to discuss the good, the bad, and the inexplicably contrived as we dive into Power Rangers Ninja Steel. I'll save the good for last and jump into the problem areas right away. First things first, I'm not going to drone on and on about the general idea of fillers or holiday specials. They are what they are, and all of us have pretty much already made up our minds regarding them. There are some okay ones in this era, like that one Dino Charge Halloween episode with so much character development and plot nuance. Okay. There was only one very specific reason I gave a damn about the Dino Charge Halloween episode. Ahem. Anyways, where was I? Right. So, getting back to Ninja Steel, now let's talk about the biggest problem area, the characters, which isn't to say, or even imply, that they're all bad ones. In fact, I would argue that the Ranger characters this season are more boring than terrible. The real issue with the characters stems from the below average storylines presented to us, very few of which allow anyone to grow on top of being poorly structured. Outside of Levi, who goes through a very noteworthy change, these characters operate no differently than when they first premiered, as if to say that every other complication they face is to be treated as a one-off sitcom plot point with absolutely no bearing on the larger whole. Ergo, why tracking down a real theme in all this is nigh impossible. And the best way to further explain my point is to dive into the characters with the most problematic relationship to the plot, and we'll start with Preston Tien. Preston is a magician who cares about his friends. Yeah, and that's about it. He's got a lot more presence than most of his team, but the only potentially interesting story they tell with him is resolved in 15 minutes, which goes back to the storyline's problem. In the episode The Ranger Ribbon, Preston's dad wants to cut down a ribbon tree. For whatever reason, he doesn't immediately recognize this landmark as having been monumental in his life, which is the reveal later on. But up until then, we get the father-son conflict but dumbed down for 5-year-olds because subtlety is not this show's forte. And then it resolves basically overnight because of a half-assed reveal that makes the entire plotline more happenstantial than it already was. Everything about this episode, except for the very end of it, feels like it comes out of nowhere, since this parental complication is never so much as alluded to prior to this moment. In one hack job of an episode, Ninja Steel accomplishes the unthinkable, completely ruining the Father Ranger dynamic, a dynamic I've constantly referenced in my videos because it's one of the best aspects of the franchise. All it would have taken is one scene, just one, to make this plot point better. One 3-minute scene earlier in the season where Preston misses the bus or something, his father has to drop him off because there's no mother here, all while Preston gets scolded. And then, Father Dearest ends up talking on the phone or something while Preston is trying to invite him to his magic show. These are softballs, guys, and Ninja Steel won't even swing at them, let alone hit them. Instead, this resolution is the second most unearned change of heart this season because the problem of build-up and patience is, unfortunately, a systemic one here. Preston is a fine character, and there's no denying the sheer amount of awesome that came from real-life brothers having a one-of-a-kind passing of the torch moment. But Ninja Steel gave him nothing to work with. Even the interesting ways his magic reacts to his ninja powers is only ever a 2-off idea. The concept of Ninja Steel reacting to the individual user is a great one, and could have been used to vastly improve the other characters, but it's never used again. Next, let's discuss Haley and Calvin together, not necessarily because they're together romantically, but because their combined amount of lines almost equates to a full character. While Presto, the Romero brothers, and Sarah, for some reason, get the lion's share of the focus, these two get considerably less. Haley has a certain instantly likable charm about her, but her story contributions are limited at best. Entire stretches of an episode, or even episodes, would go by where I felt like she never contributed a single meaningful line of dialogue, which is equally as true of Calvin. Yeah, he fixes things, but when does he do that for reasons that aren't to impress a pack of grease extras? As I mentioned, the Ninja Steel made Preston's magic real, so why couldn't it give Calvin added mechanical know-how? Many videos ago, I spoke about how interesting it might have been to see how two Rangers already in a romantic relationship would function. Many times in Rangers, we get romantic subplots that the show doesn't do much with, or ones that only resolve at the very end. But this time, all of that is established beforehand. prompting them to then dig into a relationship already in progress and how the current adventures affect it. But, not surprisingly, there is not much done with that either, other than a very generic Face Your Fears episode and an interesting but somewhat forgettable Student Council President episode. There's a little bit of chemistry there, but take away their very forced cuddle scenes and you'd have no reason to suspect that they're in a relationship at all. Just like the two characters in question, their relationship is just there, and neither adds much to the story, because the story never lets it. Now, let's take a moment to discuss Victor and Monty. Let me put it this way. Their impossibly moronic antics left me facepalming so much that it got to a point where I was facepalming the second they hit the screen. Like a Pavlovian dog, that's what they did to me. Now, credit where credit is due. They aren't obnoxiously unfunny all the time, and the Adventures of Redbud episode might be their only season highlight on that end. It's almost commendable when you consider the number of unique ways the pair can give you migraines, but trying to compete with Norg for title of most annoying side character is not the trophy Victor Vincent should want to add to his collection. The season finale was a great chance to redeem this peculiar relationship, a chance for Victor to finally admit to his often underappreciated pal that he wouldn't have come very far without him. But no, instead we get an all too fitting visual metaphor for everything they've contributed to the season. Fittingly, we'll talk about Sarah right before we dig into how she helped foster the worst part of Ninja Steel, through no fault of her own. So Sarah is a star athlete. Oh, but she's also a brilliant inventor. Oh, but let's not forget, she also apparently has a heart of gold and gladly gives to the less fortunate. Oh, but she also has a completely out of left field issue with her mother, who's always butting in, apparently. Side note, she butted in a total of once. And what do all these random assortment of characteristics add up to? She's okay. She's not very interesting, but not insulting either, kind of like Mia. But she's also got the Nick problem of being over-characterized, while several of her teammates aren't characterized enough. But unlike Nick, who's at least interesting to talk about because his brand of suck is unique at least, Sarah is just boring. But because she gets so much focus, she becomes unintentionally problematic. Early on, she learned a valuable lesson about trying to take on too much by herself. So why didn't that automatically translate to understanding her mother was just trying to help? Nothing about Sarah's character as presented speaks towards a rebellious side. If anything, she can do as much as she can because of her mother's behind-the-scenes influence to this point. So why is their so-called butting in only an issue now? And if it is, why not make their conflicts a Collins-like methodical build-up to a later understanding? Was there seriously nobody on this writing staff that thought about how all of this could have been better structured, or how mind-numbingly plain the whole episode ended up being, or how petty it would look that the so-called smart girl takes issue with a supportive parental figure that, mind you, at least half of her team doesn't have anymore? And that's on top of this whole mess being resolved with even less nuance than Preston's troubles. Power Rangers is all about working together, and great characters have been developed from learning that invaluable knowledge because cohesion doesn't come overnight. Sarah already knows she can only do so much by herself. In fact, she disagrees with Brody when he attempts to follow the scriptures of the Jaden worship cult by lone wolfing the enemy of the weak. Brody figured it out, but Sarah kept coming back to that trait without any growth or progression on that end. But then, on several arbitrary occasions, she's very open to the idea of trusting and working with others. Just like her defining traits, the way Sarah goes about handling different problems is equally as randomized, as she jumps in and out of whatever role the show needs from her at the time. Princess Viera gets her own special little category for being just the worst. The awkward, stilted way she's portrayed doesn't help, but that's far from the largest issue. Rather, it goes back to the season taglines of terrible writing, lazy plot points, and impatient, undeserved resolutions. Viera is the quality-sucking black hole that represents all of that. To which I say, congrats, Shayla, you no longer hold the title of most egregiously terrible princess. Over the course of a 22-minute episode, this princess changes not her world view, that would be bad enough. She changes her galactic view, because Sarah, of course, saves her from a fall. To say that this changed Viera rather quickly would be laughably underselling it. No, this changed her in 4 freaking minutes. She says she always believed in a better way, but I have my doubts. Here's why. If that were true, then she wouldn't have ordered an attack on the Rangers first, who she's never met before. She did that to prove to her people that she could be a strong ruler, not to prove that her alternative way of thinking had merit. Might makes right. That's what she was raised to believe, and that's how she acts initially. What probably equates to nearly 2 decades of being taught one way, upended in record-breaking time because one random Earth girl who she barely knows convinced her it wasn't so. And oh, by the way, the Power Rangers destroyed your royal guard, right? Emphasis on power. So wouldn't that mean that their might made right? But that's different now, because from your perspective, they very recently became the good guys, meaning that maybe, just maybe, there's nuance and layers to the situation that shouldn't just be overlooked so you can have a jarringly simplistic reformation. Maybe the real takeaway here should have been that there's more than one way, not that there's only this one very divergent way. And even if her change of heart was in any way viable, she completely fails to address the most essential questions. Why does the Lion Galaxy believe the way it does? Why is that their default socio-political ideology? And if it's been that way for so long, why would they approve of any kind of sweeping reforms just because you demand it? For example, a might makes right society would probably find a lot of value in recreational fighting, which probably explains how Viera knows Galvanax. To the show's credit, that's a very clever way to connect her to the main bads. But if you then change that through the Ranger way, then everyone in the Lion Galaxy can only fight in defense. Your economy would take a hit while everyone points the finger at you. Don't get me wrong, the change you want to make sounds good, but when the inevitable resistance to your new galactic order comes, what will you do then? I've seen this game play out before, so you'd better have a little bit of might too. Guys, I know I'm overthinking this, I do. And I would rather not dive into fictional politics, or any type of politics, but then along comes Ninja Steel, trying to convince us that galactic change is easy and that anyone can just follow the Ranger way without a single real thought on the matter, and then experience zero repercussions. They made the active choice to make Viera a ruler, but her arc is somehow resolved faster than robot Aiden's. It's egregiously absurd. It took the Dino Thunder Bunch many episodes, if not most of the season, to really understand what it meant to be a Ranger, and that was with Tommy himself guiding them. And beyond that, not even the Power Rangers themselves follow the so-called Ranger way all the time, whatever that even means presently. Best example, Zordon always said, keep your Ranger identity a secret. But to save the world, the Space Rangers do just the opposite in one of the flat-out best Ranger scenes ever conceived. It's not always clear-cut. If Viera was presented as actually struggling with this life-altering decision, taking several episodes to truly buy into and understand what the Rangers were all about, perhaps even question or challenge some of their beliefs along the way, then we've got something potentially legendary. Because then the narrative would be the Power Rangers helping to change the universe so that evil is less likely, on top of stopping the evil already present. That's never been done before. But instead, what we got was the equivalent of someone watching a ShamWow infomercial and thinking, man, I just knew there was a better way to clean. What was that number again? It might just be the most excruciatingly tone-deaf plot point of the entire Neo Saban era so far. And adding to that, the powers that come from Viera's lightning-quick awakening are given to Brody. As in, the one Ranger who decided to save and reform Viera is not rewarded at all, while the Red Ranger collects a sizable power-up by simply being the Red Ranger. And again, I'm forced to ask, who the hell read through this script and thought any of this added up? By the scale of it all, this is Sarah's single most important contribution to the story. I know that I've been mostly critical of her, but she was actually very well utilized in these episodes. The problem is, the whole situation seemed like a better fit for Haley, given who she is, and Sarah is already overly involved in several other plot lines. But as is, I'd have to call Sarah the MVP of 2 episodes that represent the low point of the season. But despite all of that, Ninja Steel gives her the proverbial middle finger while they bathe Wonder Child Brody in undeserved riches. But at this point, I think you all get it by now. So let us please finally leave the negative zone and shift into the good things Ninja Steel did. And yes, I do think Brody is actually one of them. Not because he's an exceptional character or leader, far from it. In fact, he might be the worst actor of the bunch, but I do think there's a logic to his quirks. He doesn't act normal because he isn't normal. He was raised on an alien spacecraft, and as a result, isn't as capable of very many normal human interactions. It's not much, and he never really grows out of it, but it's a hell of a lot better than the last emotionless leader they forced on us. And his standalone mentality was thankfully short-lived and never brought up again. But the best thing this season did with Brody is how he relates to and connects with Levi. The idea of Brody being somewhat put off by Levi's fame initially makes perfect sense, because remember, he grew up on Galvanax's ship. Galvanax is the champion of WWE but in space, so the bluster and pompous attitudes of the famous would absolutely rub him the wrong way. But despite all of that, they form a natural friendship before Levi's true identity is revealed. It's an easy thing to set up, but there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Unlike several aspects of this season, their relationship and the reveal later on is step by step, fairly well handled, and does add a bit of depth to both. Levi is one of the better actors of the bunch, but even he wouldn't be as much of a character without Brody, so I'm glad they emphasized their dynamic. And to his credit, he eventually recognizes the importance of the Ranger mission and responsibly cancels his concerts in response. Some people may take issue with how the Aiden situation played out, but I thought it was pretty good. All of us assumed that the Gold Ranger would be Aiden, which ended up being true, but then Levi comes around as this famous singer with no recollection of his family or his ninja past. And before that, Madame Odious is clearly warping his mind after having obtained the Gold Ninja Star herself, forcing us to question whether or not Levi could end up being a threat to the Rangers as a Gold Sleeper agent. If Odious removed certain memories, she could have also implanted some to use later, which then leads to what could have been the real Aiden showing up. It seems too easy, but the brothers recognize each other almost instantly, so maybe it's legit. And maybe the reason Aiden is being so aggressive with only Levi is because Aiden should have been the Gold Ranger, but then the Nexus Prism chose some random country singer. That's gotta hurt. Or perhaps he suspects, but cannot yet prove, that Odious might be biding her time to activate Levi. Then the truth of the matter is revealed in a really good episode. Aiden's emotional display made me wonder if his implanted memories might just override his programming and make him an ally going forward, but instead, he attempts to destroy the Rangers but ends up getting taken out himself. And in probably the best Brody moment of the season, his pain over losing his brother a second time is evident. Finally, the weight of everything seems to be taking a toll on him. But then, Levi gets his Aiden memories back and helps Brody finish the song their father taught them in a bona fide season highlight. The way Brody, Levi, and Robot Aiden were all set up in relation to each other inspired a bevy of questions with many possible answers, and it also toyed around with expectations a little bit by giving us a well-conceived roundabout way of saying that Aiden was here the whole time. It's the single most interesting thing Ninja Steel did, and while the Robot Aiden stuff was a little rushed in typical Ninja Steel fashion, the factors leading up to it weren't. There was some thought that went into it, as well as a resolution that finally felt earned, which was all set up by the other really good thing about this season, Madame Odious. We've all seen this type of betrayal in the works plot point before, but it's always a welcome change of pace, especially since we've barely had any of that for the last 6 years. Odious made what could have been a bare-bones, by-the-numbers villain plot exceedingly more interesting, and it helps that it was her that set into motion the best story arc that Ninja Steel gave us. And yeah, she probably could have gone one step further and just made Levi evil for a few episodes, but the way they flipped the all-too-common Evil Ranger narrative was pretty well done, and even when all that backfires, she's still able to get one over on Ripcord while also continually thinking of ways to take out Galvanax. Odious was one of the only things Ninja Steel was patient about. She had to keep changing her plans and her approach while hiding in plain sight, all leading up to getting the drop on Galvanax during the season finale. Didn't work exactly like she planned, but then again, she literally had the last laugh, and I'm completely on board with that. Not quite sure how Sledge's arrival next season will change the villain dynamics, but if it were me, I'd make Odious the central focus, because she would force the Rangers to be much more clever with their approach. Sledge would not. Also worth a brief mention is Mick, mainly because after a number of various roles as various side characters in the franchise, Kelson Henderson finally got to be a Power Ranger. That just feels right. Almost like a meta-narrative, where future Boom finally got his chance to suit up for real. I could get more into how they did next to nothing with the fact that Princess Viera's people literally enslaved his, but let's just leave that alone. Beyond that, Mick actually proves to be a sneaky smart mentor at times, capable of teaching the Rangers by guiding them to their own realizations. It was a pretty unique way to have him instruct the up-and-coming team, even if the lessons themselves were fairly obvious. Ninja Steel, to me, operates like a much lesser version of Ninja Storm, fittingly enough, in the sense that both seasons have ups and downs in terms of quality as the season progresses. When I asked months ago if Ninja Steel was improving, I think it was, but then it loses a bit of steam prior to Levi's arrival. Things start looking up. Then the Ranger Ribbon episode happens and everything goes to hell. But then the Aiden twist happens, giving us a legitimately great moment in the season. Then Viera happens and ruins all of that. Some episodes are funny, others are far too cringeworthy. Some episodes are good, with at least 2, maybe 3 great ones, but several more are lacking or just flat out terrible. So basically, not as bad as this, and we'll wait to see if it can be better than this. Even with all the numerous issues Samurai had, I still ended up kind of liking it because there were aspects there to like. Ninja Steel, so far, is following a very similar trajectory. But the promise of cameos for Super Ninja Steel has me worried that they'll haphazardly duplicate Super Megaforce and all the problems thereof. There is a way to do cameos meaningfully, and it's something I discussed when we talked about improving Overdrive, so only time will tell on that front. All in all, I can't call Ninja Steel a good season of Power Rangers. There's not enough patience in the plot progression, most of the stories and the resolutions to them are either obvious, lazy, unearned, or all three, the characters hardly grow, change, or develop meaningfully as a direct result of the previous point, and it all adds up to way too many glaring problem areas, which, of course, isn't to say that there isn't plenty of good and a little bit of great there, but those positive aspects struck me as too few and far between to cancel out the negatives. And they completely waste a chance to make the theme of all of this family ties, because beyond the Romero family, all of the other episodes in that category might as well be filler, in addition to being some of the worst episodes of the season. Not to mention, we never even see Calvin or Haley's family. This season seems to have engendered a lot of polarity within the fanbase. Some people like it, some people don't, and others want to drown it in the Nile River. I firmly believe that real fans should never shy away from challenging the franchise and other fans. But let's be the fan base that can do that through understanding and not screaming. And that's something even I need to work on. And I know that applies to only a small percentage, but that percentage can also sometimes be the loudest, so let's be cognizant of that. In closing, Ninja Steel has a lot of work to do in Season 2, but honestly, I'm not supremely confident that they'll put in that work. So far, every season with the Super tag has been in some way, shape, or form worse than the season before it. Not even Dino Charge could escape that fate. Whether you liked Ninja Steel or couldn't stand it, as fans, I think we can all agree that we deserve more than this. We deserve more than the ironic expectation of a Super season being anything but. We deserve more, and we deserve better. And the low ratings Ninja Steel received should be a clear sign to Saban and friends that we're starting to demand better too. And that's a very good thing, even if you're a huge fan of Ninja Steel. Because if they make positive changes as a result, then the franchise could have a new lease on life, and then everyone wins. We've seen this cycle play out time and time and time again, and every time, the Rangers come back as strong as ever, except with Samurai. The opening episode of Super Ninja Steel should tell us a lot, so I'll probably give my thoughts on that when it hits in about a week. Just don't expect an episode 2-episode analysis unless there's something that demands immediate attention, either for better or for worse. But until then, thanks for watching.